He thought he had lost a love, until he found her again on the pavement selling churros, next to two boys who looked like copies of himself. If you like stories like this, be sure to subscribe to this channel. We post every day, continuing. The March sun beat down on the streets of London with an almost cruel intensity, creating heat waves that danced over the asphalt of Oxford Street. Raphael Miller adjusted the knot of his Italian tie as he walked towards the mirrored building where he had just closed another £1 million contract. At 32 he had built an empire in the tech sector that few could rival. His company, Miller Tech Solutions, was synonymous with innovation and efficiency in the British market. The meeting had been an absolute success. Another 15 million in signed contracts, an expansion into northern England secured, and international investors showing increasing interest in his projects. Raphael should have been euphoric, but a strange feeling hung over him as he crossed the busy avenue. Perhaps it was the accumulated fatigue of the past few weeks, or the constant feeling of emptiness that had accompanied him since he had become the successful man he had always dreamed of being. He decided to walk to the office instead of calling his driver. He needed air, movement, something to break the mechanical routine his life had become. It was when he turned the corner onto Carnaby Street that his world collapsed. There, among street vendors and the typical hustle and bustle of the city centre, was an improvised churro stall. Nothing unusual, London was full of them. But it was the woman behind the counter who made his heart race and his legs tremble as if he had been punched in the stomach. Isabella, even from a distance, even with her hair tied in a simple ponytail and wearing a crumpled apron, he recognized her instantly. The same expressive brown eyes, the same elegant posture even amidst simplicity, the same shy smile that had once been solely his. But it wasn't just Isabella who held his attention in an absolutely disturbing way. Two children were playing next to the stall, blonde boys who couldn't have been more than 5 years old. Identical twins, with golden hair that shone under the strong sun, and faces that made Raphael feel as if he were looking into a mirror of the past. The features were unmistakable, the shape of their eyes, the line of their jaw, the way they smiled sideways when something amused them. "Mum, can I play with the pebble?" asked one of them, his childish voice carrying a London accent that Raphael knew well. "Only until the next customer arrives, Peter," Isabella replied, her voice still melodious but laden with a weariness Raphael had never seen before. Peter, and the other boy, who was tinkering with a broken toy car, must be... Raphael tried to hear the name, but his mind was in complete chaos. 6 years. It had been exactly 6 years since Isabella had vanished from his life after that terrible fight. That night when he had chosen a business meeting instead of accompanying her to a doctor's appointment she said was important. 6 years. The age those boys appeared to be. Raphael felt the world spin around him. He leaned against a lamppost, trying to breathe, trying to process what he was seeing. The boys were his sons. He was absolutely sure. Every feature, every gesture, every expression was a faithful copy of his own childhood. How had Isabella managed to hide this from him? Why had she disappeared without saying anything? Memories of the last night they spent together returned with devastating force. Isabella had arrived home nervously, saying she needed to talk to him about something important. But Raphael was immersed in preparations for a presentation that could win his company the biggest contract in history. She had insisted, mentioned a doctor's appointment, asked him to accompany her the next day. "Isa, you know how important this meeting is for us," he had said, barely lifting his eyes from the documents scattered across the table. "After I close this deal, we'll have our whole lives ahead of us. We can travel, get married, have children. Just give me a few more months." She had remained silent for a long moment, her eyes glistening, before whispering, "A few months might be too late, Raphael." He hadn't given importance to her words. He was too focused on the numbers, the charts, the presentation that would change their lives. The next day, when he returned home after closing the contract, Isabella had vanished. Clothes, documents, everything. As if she had never existed. For weeks, Raphael had tried to find her. He called friends, visited family, even hired a private detective. But Isabella Shaw had simply disappeared without a trace. Gradually, he had convinced himself that she had found another man, someone who could give her the attention he couldn't offer at the time. But now, looking at those two identical boys playing at the feet of the woman he still secretly loved, Raphael understood the devastating truth. The doctor's appointment, her nervousness, her insistence that he accompany her. She was pregnant with twins, and he had chosen a contract instead of being by her side at the most important moment of their lives. "Michael, be careful with the trolley." Isabella's voice cut through his thoughts when the second boy almost knocked over a pot of hot oil. Michael, Peter and Michael. His sons had names, personalities, an entire life he had missed. Raphael felt a pain in his chest so intense that he had to lean against the wall of a nearby building. Tears he hadn't shed in years began to burn his eyes. A customer approached the stall, a middle-aged man who asked for 2 sweet churros. Raphael watched Isabella work, her movements precise but tired, the way she smiled at the customer with a politeness that didn't reach her eyes. She was thinner than he remembered. Her hands seemed rough from constant work, and there was a sadness in her posture that broke his heart. When the customer left, Isabella looked around, and her eyes met his. For a moment that seemed eternal, they stared at each other across the distance and lost time. Raphael saw recognition form on her face, followed by a flash of panic and finally a mask of coldness that she managed to put on with impressive speed. Raphael approached slowly as if he were moving through a dream. Each step seemed an eternity. The boys noticed him first, curious about the well-dressed man walking towards their mother's stall. "Good afternoon," Raphael said, his voice coming out hoarser than he intended. "Could you sell me 2 sweet churros, please?" Isabella looked him in the eyes for a second before lowering her gaze to the churros frying in the hot oil. Her hands trembled slightly as she prepared them, but her voice came out firm when she replied, "Of course, £8. Raphael held out a £50 note, knowing she wouldn't have change. "Keep the change." "I don't need charity," Isabella replied dryly, taking coins from a pot and counting out exactly £42 to return. The silence between them was heavy with 6 years of resentment, regret, and unspoken words. The boys continued playing, oblivious to the tension that hung in the air like a storm about to explode. "Isa," Raphael began, his voice almost a whisper. "My name is Isabella. To you, it's Miss Isabella," she cut in, wrapping the churros in parchment paper with abrupt movements. Raphael looked at the boys again, trying to engrave every detail in his memory. Peter had found an interesting pebble and was showing it to Michael, who laughed with a giggle that was exactly like Raphael's when he was a child. "They are—" He began the question he already knew the answer to. "They're none of your business," Isabella replied, but her voice faltered at the end of the sentence. She also looked at the boys, and Raphael saw something break in her eyes. "Take your churros and leave, Raphael. You don't belong in this world." "Isa, please, I need to know." "You need to know," she exploded in a furious whisper, being careful not to draw her children's attention. "Where were you when I needed to know what it would be like to raise 2 babies alone? Where were you when I needed to know if I could pay the rent working while pregnant? Where were you when I needed to know if my children would have something to eat the next day?" Her words hit Raphael like knives. He saw the raw pain in her eyes, years of struggle and sacrifice she had faced alone. "Isa, I didn't know. If you had told me—" "I tried to tell you," she hissed through clenched teeth. "Remember that. Doctor's appointment that was so important? Remember me begging you to accompany me. It was to find out if I was expecting 1 or 2 babies. It was to hear their hearts beat for the first time. But you had more important things to do." Raphael felt as if the ground had opened beneath his feet. The appointment, the pregnancy. She had tried to share the most important moment with him, and he had chosen a business meeting. "I didn't know, Isa. If I had known you were pregnant—" "And what would have changed?" she asked, wiping her hands on her apron with unnecessary force. "Would you have cancelled the meeting? Would you have chosen to be with me instead of closing another contract?" Raphael opened his mouth to reply that yes, of course he would have chosen her, but the words died in his throat. Because, being honest with himself, he wasn't sure. 6 years ago, he was obsessed with success, with money, with building the business empire he now possessed. Would he really have chosen differently? "That's what I thought," Isabella said, seeing the hesitation in his eyes. "Go away, Raphael. Go back to your world of contracts and important meetings. We're fine without you." But Raphael could see that they weren't fine. He could see the deep weariness in Isabella's eyes, the boy's simple and mended clothes, the improvised stall that barely made enough to support a family. He could see that she was struggling alone to raise his children. "Uncle, aren't you going to eat your churros?" Peter had approached, looking at Raphael with childish curiosity. Raphael knelt to be at the boy's height, his heart breaking as he saw his own eyes looking back at him. "Hi, champ, what's your name?" "Peter Shaw Smith," the boy replied proudly. "And that's my brother Michael. We're twins." Shaw Smith. Isabella had given them her surname and her deceased father's. There was no mention of Raphael anywhere in the boys' identities. It was as if he had truly never existed in their lives. "Peter, come here," Isabella called, her voice tense. "Don't bother the customer." "He's not bothering me," Raphael said softly, still looking at the boy who was a perfect copy of himself at 5 years old. "How old are you, Peter?" 5.5, Peter replied, proudly showing 5 fingers. "My birthday was last month. I got a new toy car, but Michael accidentally broke it." "It was an accident," Michael protested, also approaching. "I said sorry." Raphael looked at the 2 boys, his sons, and felt an emotion so intense that it almost knocked him down. They were perfect, intelligent, affectionate, full of life despite the difficulties they clearly faced, and he had missed every moment of the first 5 years of their lives. "Peter, Michael, come here now," Isabella said, her voice firmer. The boys ran to her, sensing the tension in the air. Raphael slowly stood up, holding the churros he had, no intention of eating. "Isa, please, can we talk? There's so much I need to say, so much I need to explain." "There's nothing to explain," she replied, pulling her children close in a protective gesture. "You made your choice 6 years ago. I made mine too. Now please, leave us in peace." Raphael looked at her, at the boys, at the life he could have had and had lost due to pure greed and ambition, a life worth more than all the contracts and fortunes in the world. "This isn't over, Isa. They are my sons too." "Prove it," she said, raising her chin defiantly. "Prove you're their father. Prove you deserve to be in their lives. Prove that this time you won't choose money when things get tough." Raphael kept those words as a promise. He would prove it. Whatever it cost, he would prove that he had changed, that he was capable of being the father and the man that Isabella and the boys deserved. But first, he needed to find out how Isabella had managed to disappear so completely from his life, and why his attempts to find her at the time had failed. As he walked back to the office, the untouched churros in his hands, Raphael was already forming a plan. He would discover the truth about what had happened 6 years ago. He would find out why Isabella had disappeared without explanation, and he would do anything necessary to win back the family he didn't even know he had lost. Because some mistakes, even the most devastating ones, deserved a second chance to be fixed. Raphael couldn't concentrate for the rest of the day. Back in his office on the top floor of the most modern commercial building in Canary Wharf, he stared out the panoramic window that offered a privileged view of the City of London. But his thoughts were completely focused on the scene he had witnessed hours earlier. Peter and Michael, his sons. The certainty pounded in his chest with the force of a hammer. He called Caroline Rivers, his personal secretary for 4 years, an extremely efficient 40-year-old woman who managed his agenda with military precision. Caroline had joined the company shortly after Isabella disappeared, recommended by a headhunter who guaranteed she was the best executive secretary in London. "Caroline, I need you to locate all files and contact records from the last 6 years, any attempt at communication that might have been blocked or filtered by you." Caroline raised a perfectly arched eyebrow, her expression revealing slight irritation. "Mr. Miller, that's very vague. May I know what you're specifically looking for?" "Any contact from a woman named Isabella Shaw, calls, emails, letters, anything." Caroline's face hardened almost imperceptibly, but she recovered quickly. I don't recall any Isabella Shaw attempting contact, sir, but I can check the files. Raphael studied her intently. There was something in her reaction, a tension he couldn't quite identify. I want all records on my desk tomorrow morning, Caroline. Everything. After she left, Raphael called Mark Taylor, his best friend from university and current minority partner in the company. If anyone could help him understand what had happened, it would be Mark. Raphael, mate, you look like you've seen a ghost, Mark said when he entered the office an hour later, finding his friend still staring out the window with a disturbed expression. Worse than that. I saw my past coming back to haunt me. Raphael told Mark everything, the reunion with Isabella, the children who were clearly his sons, the devastating revelation that she had tried to tell him about the pregnancy 6 years ago. Mark listened in silence, his expression growing increasingly serious. Raphael, are you sure they're your sons? Mark, they are identical to me as a child, same eyes, same hair, same gestures, and their ages match perfectly with when Issa disappeared. And you said she tried to tell you at the time. She said she tried. Remember that contract with the French multinational? That presentation that changed everything for the company? It was the night before she said she needed to talk to me about something important. Mark ran a hand through his hair, pensive. Raphael, do you remember that at that time you were completely obsessed with that deal? You worked 16 hours a day, didn't answer the phone, didn't read personal emails. Are you trying to tell me it's my fault? I'm trying to say that maybe Isabella really tried to talk to you, and you weren't emotionally or physically available to listen. Mark approached his friend's desk. But there's something else that worries me. Remember when you tried to find her after she vanished? You even hired a private detective. I remember. No one could find a trace of her. It was as if she had evaporated. For someone to just vanish like that, Raphael, either she had help from someone very competent, or... Mark hesitated. Or what? Or someone was actively sabotaging your searches. Mark's suggestion planted a seed of suspicion in Raphael's mind. Who would have an interest in keeping Isabella away from him, and why? The next morning, Caroline arrived at the office with a thin folder she placed on Raphael's desk with an air of studied efficiency. Here are all the records I could find, Mr. Miller. As I said, there are no records of contact attempts from an Isabella Shaw. Raphael opened the folder. It was practically empty, containing only a few promotional emails and calls from suppliers. Is that all? That's all that exists in the company's official files, sir. Something in the way she emphasized official files caught Raphael's attention. And in the unofficial ones? Caroline hesitated for a fraction of a second. I don't know what you're talking about, sir. After Caroline left, Raphael decided to investigate on his own. He knew the company's filing system better than anyone, and knew that Caroline, however efficient she might be, did not have access to all areas of the network. He began to sift through old backups, system logs, and even the server's electronic trash. It was late afternoon when he found something interesting. Hidden in a folder of temporary files that should have been deleted years ago, there were records of dozens of contact attempts from Isabella Shaw between March and August 2018, exactly the months after her disappearance. Desperate emails, unanswered calls, even a registered letter that had been signed for by reception, but never reached his hands. Raphael read each message, his heart breaking. A little more with each line. Raphael, please call me. I need to talk to you about something very important. I tried to call, but your secretary said you don't want to talk to me. Please, it's about our future. I'm pregnant, Raphael. Pregnant with twins. I need you now. I don't understand why you're not responding. I thought you loved me. I'm going to have to make a decision alone. I can't wait any longer. This is my last attempt. If you don't respond, I'll understand that it's really over between us. Raphael had to lean on his chair, feeling a terrible nausea rise in his throat. Isabella had tried to tell him. She had tried multiple times, desperately, and someone had intercepted all attempts at communication. The last email in the folder was sent 3 days before Isabella completely disappeared. In it, she said she had decided to start a new life elsewhere, where she could raise her children in peace, without depending on someone who clearly didn't want to know about her. Raphael checked the file's metadata. All had been moved to that folder by the user C. Rivers, Caroline Rivers. His secretary had systematically intercepted all of Isabella's attempts to contact him and had hidden the evidence for 6 years. That night, Raphael could barely sleep. His mind buzzed with anger, guilt, and growing despair. Caroline had sabotaged his life, his family, his future. But why? Why would a secretary do something so cruel? The next morning, even before Caroline arrived at the office, Raphael was already in the building analyzing more files. He then discovered a series of emails exchanged between Caroline and some of the company's competitors, negotiating privileged information in exchange for financial compensation. The secretary was not just an ambitious employee, she was a corporate spy who had infiltrated his company. When Caroline arrived, she found Raphael sitting behind his desk with the coldest expression she had ever seen. "Good morning, Mr. Miller. Can I prepare your coffee?" "Sit down, Caroline." Raphael's voice was dangerously calm. "Let's talk about Isabella Shaw." Caroline tried to maintain her composure, but Raphael saw the flash of panic in her eyes. "We discussed this yesterday, sir. There are no records." "A lie." Raphael turned the computer screen so she could see the recovered emails. "There are 53 contact attempts that you intercepted, blocked, and hid from me. Do you care to explain why?" Caroline's face paled, but she tried one last gambit. "Mr. Miller, I was just protecting your business interests. That woman was a distraction that could harm—" "That woman was pregnant with my children," Raphael exploded, his voice echoing through the office. "She was trying to tell me we were going to be parents, and you systematically sabotaged every attempt." Caroline stood up, her mask of efficient secretary finally falling. "And what would you have done, Raphael? Dropped everything to play the doting daddy? You were building an empire. You couldn't afford sentimental distractions. That wasn't your decision to make." "No?" Caroline laughed bitterly. "I saved your company, Raphael. I saved your career. That simple woman would have destroyed everything you built. And now you want to blame me for doing what was necessary." Raphael looked at her with a mixture of disgust and incredulity. "You destroyed my family. My children grew up without a father because of your interference." "Your children?" Caroline practically spat the words. "You didn't even know they existed. And it probably would be better that way. You've already shown what kind of father you would be. The kind who puts business before family." Her words hit Raphael like slaps, mainly because there was a painful truth in them. 6 years ago, he really was obsessed with success. Perhaps even if he had known about the pregnancy, he would have reacted badly. But at least it would have been his choice to make, not Caroline's. "You're fired," he said finally, "and I'm going to sue you for sabotage and industrial espionage. I also found the emails you exchanged with competitors." Caroline smiled coldly. "You can try, Raphael, but let's see what happens when I tell all the press about the successful businessman who abandoned his pregnant girlfriend with twins. How will that affect your reputation and your contracts?" "Do what you want," Raphael replied, surprising himself with the calm in his voice. "I no longer care about reputation or contracts. I only care about getting my family back." After Caroline stormed out of the office, Raphael was left alone with the weight of the truth. Isabella had not disappeared on a whim, or because she had found another man. She had desperately tried to include him in her children's lives and had been systematically blocked by a manipulative secretary who thought she knew what was best for him. Now Raphael knew the truth, but the question that tormented him was, did it change anything? Isabella still hated him. She still believed that he had deliberately chosen to abandon her. And, being brutally honest with himself, Raphael wasn't sure he could convince her otherwise. But he had to try. Peter and Michael were his sons, and he had missed 5 years of their lives. He wouldn't miss another day. That afternoon, Raphael returned to the corner where he had found Isabella the day before. She was there again, frying churros while the boys played nearby. This time he didn't approach immediately. He watched from a distance, trying to understand the family dynamic, their routine. Isabella worked with efficient but tired movements. Periodically she looked at her children, making sure they were safe, offered them water when they seemed thirsty. The boys played with admirable creativity. They turned pebbles into cars, branches into swords, shadows into monsters to defeat. Raphael realized that despite the obvious financial difficulties, there was abundant love in that small family. Isabella had raised two happy, well-mannered and loving boys, alone, without his help. When he finally approached the stall, Isabella saw him coming and her expression hardened immediately. "Two sweet churros again?" she asked with professional coldness. "Actually, I came to talk. I discovered some things about why you disappeared." Isabella stopped stirring the churros and looked him in the eyes for the first time since their reunion. "I didn't disappear, Raphael. I left. There's a difference. You tried to tell me about the pregnancy 53 times. The statement caught her by surprise. Raphael saw the mask of coldness waver for a moment. "My secretary intercepted all your attempts at communication, all the emails, all the calls, even the registered letter. I only found out yesterday." Isabella was silent for a long moment, processing the information. "And what does that change, Raphael?" she finally asked, but her voice was less hostile. "It changes everything. It means you didn't abandon me. It means I abandoned you, even without knowing." "Daddy, Daddy!" Peter came running, interrupting the conversation. For a moment, Raphael thought the boy was talking to him, and his heart raced, but Peter ran past him and hugged Isabella's legs. "Mum, Michael said you're our dad and our mum." Isabella stroked her son's hair with infinite tenderness. "That's right, my love. I'm everything you need." Raphael felt each word like a stab. She had been both father and mother to the boys. She had handled everything alone. And now he appeared wanting to claim a place he perhaps no longer deserved. "Isa," he said softly when Peter went back to play with Michael, "can I at least try to get to know them? I'm not asking for forgiveness or trying to win you back. I just want to get to know my sons." Isabella studied him for a long moment as if trying to see through him, trying to find out if she could trust his intentions. "Will you disappear again when business becomes more important?" she asked finally. Raphael looked at Peter and Michael, who were building a castle with stones and branches, laughing together at jokes only they understood. He looked at Isabella, who, despite all the weariness and resentment, was still the most beautiful woman he had ever known. "No," he replied, and for the first time in years, he was absolutely sure of his priorities. "This time you are the most important thing." The following weeks established a strange and delicate routine between Raphael, Isabella, and the twins. Every day after work, Raphael would stop by the churro stall. At first, Isabella treated him with the coldness of a merchant serving any customer, but gradually, very gradually, she began to relax her guard. Raphael discovered that the most effective strategy was not to try to win Isabella over directly, but rather to connect with Peter and Michael. The children, with the brutal honesty of innocence, did not carry the weight of past hurts. For them, Raphael was simply the handsome uncle who appeared every day and always had time to listen to their stories. "Uncle Raph!" Peter shouted one rainy afternoon, running towards him with a crumpled drawing in his hand. "Look what I made at school today." Raphael knelt to examine the drawing with the seriousness the situation deserved. It was a family. A woman with brown hair, two small boys, and a tall male figure drawn a little separate from the group. "It's beautiful, champ. Who are these people?" "This is Mum." Peter pointed to the female figure. "These are me and Michael, and this—" He hesitated, looking at Isabella, who was watching the conversation with a tense expression. "This is our daddy who lives far away." The silence that followed was deafening. Raphael felt as if someone had squeezed his heart with an iron hand. The children knew. Somehow, at the instinctive level that only children possess, Peter and Michael knew that he was the absent father of the figure they were drawing. "Peter, put your drawing away," Isabella said softly. "It's time for us to go home." "But, Mum, I haven't told Uncle Raph yet about what happened at playtime." Raphael looked at Isabella, a silent question in his eyes. She sighed, seeming to make a decision that cost a lot of effort. "All right, 5 minutes, but then we're leaving." It was the first time she had given him explicit permission to interact with the boys. Raphael felt a wave of gratitude that almost knocked him down. "Tell me, champ, what happened at playtime?" Peter immediately brightened. "John Paul said that me and Michael don't have a dad because our mum didn't want to marry anyone. So I said that we do have a dad. He's just very busy saving the world. Raphael had to swallow the emotion that rose in his throat. And what did Michael say? Michael, who was shyer than his brother, slowly approached. I said that our dad is strong and brave, but he lives very far away because he has important things to do. Raphael looked at Isabella and saw tears in her eyes. She had raised those children not to hate their absent father. She had invented a story that preserved his image even after years of abandonment. It was a gesture of love and protection that broke Raphael's heart. You know what? Raphael said, pulling the two boys close to him. You're right. Your dad is brave and strong. But you know what else? He's pretty stupid too. Why? Peter asked, intrigued. Because it took him too long to discover that the most important thing in the world wasn't his work. It was you two and your mum. Isabella held her breath, but didn't interrupt. And now? Michael asked with the innocent curiosity of a 5-year-old. Now he really wants to learn to be the father you deserve. If Mum lets him, of course. The two boys turned to Isabella with pleading eyes. Can we, Mum? Can Uncle Raph be our daddy? Isabella was silent for a long moment, clearly struggling with conflicting emotions. Finally, she knelt to be at her children's height. Being a daddy is much more than just showing up and playing once in a while, she said carefully. A real daddy stays when things get tough. He takes care of you when you're sick. He helps with homework when he's tired. He loves you even when you're naughty. I can do all that, Raphael said, his voice laden with emotion, if you give me a chance. Isabella looked him in the eyes for a long moment. Raphael saw years of pain, distrust, and weariness in that gaze, but he also saw something else, a spark of hope that she was desperately trying to suppress. A chance, she said finally, but with rules. Any rule you want. You can't promise things you can't keep. You can't show up when you feel like it and disappear when it suits you. And if you hurt my children, her voice became dangerously low. If you break their hearts like you broke mine, I'll make you disappear from their lives forever. Understood? Understood, Raphael replied, and he truly understood. Isabella was a mother protecting her young, and she had every right to be fierce. In the days that followed, Raphael discovered that being a father was more challenging and more rewarding than any deal he had ever closed. He started small, helping the boys with their shoes when they came back from school, carrying Michael's heavy backpack, listening to Peter recite the multiplication tables he was learning. One afternoon, when he arrived at the stall, he found Michael crying while holding the pieces of a broken toy car. What happened, champ? I was playing and the car fell into the street, Michael sobbed. A car ran over it and broke it. It was my favorite. Raphael picked up the pieces of the toy, examining them carefully. It was a cheap toy car, probably bought at a pound shop, but for Michael it represented a precious treasure. You know what? I think we can fix this. Really? Michael's eyes lit up. Of course, but we'll need the help of a broken car expert. Raphael spent the whole night in the apartment, using all the skills he had developed building models in his teenage years to repair the toy. He used glue, paint, even parts from other objects to restore the car. It wasn't perfect, but it was functional, and in a way even more special. When he handed the repaired toy car to Michael the next day, the boy hugged him with a force that almost knocked him down. Thank you, Uncle Raph. You're the best toy car repairman in the world. Raphael looked at Isabella and saw something new in her eyes. No longer distrust, but a cautious curiosity. For the first time since their reunion, she was seeing him not as the man who had abandoned her, but as the man who had spent the whole night fixing a child's broken toy. The real turning point happened 3 weeks later, during an especially hot afternoon. Raphael had arrived at the stall as usual, but found only Isabella working. The boys were not around. Where are Peter and Michael? He asked, surprised by the children's absence. Still at school. There's an extra activity today. Isabella wiped the sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. They'll be staying later. Raphael noticed that she looked more tired than usual. There were dark circles under her eyes and her hands trembled slightly while stirring the churros. Are you okay? I'm great, she replied automatically, but Raphael didn't believe the answer. Isa, when was the last time you ate something? I ate this morning, I think. You think? Raphael frowned. Sit down here, now. I can't sit down. I have to work. I'll take care of the stall. Sit down. Isabella looked at him as if he had suggested she fly to the moon. You don't know how to fry churros, Raphael. How old do you think I am? Of course I know how to fry churros. My grandmother had a stall at Borough Market when I was a child. Isabella hesitated, clearly divided between the need to rest and the reluctance to accept his help. Finally, weariness won. She sat on an improvised plastic chair, watching Raphael take control of the frying with a competence she didn't expect. You really know what you're doing, she admitted, surprised. Told you my grandmother had a stall. I spent every summer of my childhood helping her. Raphael flipped the churros with the dexterity of someone with practice. She always said that a real man knew how to cook for the people he loved. And you love us? The question slipped out before Isabella could stop herself. Raphael stopped what he was doing and looked at her directly in the eyes. I love Peter and Michael because they are my sons, even if I only discovered that a month ago. And you... He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. You are the strongest, bravest, and most incredible woman I have ever known. Always have been. And if I haven't completely destroyed my chances, I would very much like to try to love you the way you deserve to be loved. Isabella was silent, processing his words. There was a vulnerability in her expression that Raphael hadn't seen in years, as if the defenses she had built were beginning to crumble. Raphael, she began, but was interrupted by the arrival of a customer. The rest of the afternoon passed in a strange but comfortable dynamic. Raphael took care of the frying, while Isabella served customers and handled the money. They worked together with a natural synchronicity, as if they had done it thousands of times before. When Peter and Michael arrived from school, they were absolutely delighted to find Raphael behind the stall, frying churros with an apron borrowed from Isabella. Uncle Raph, you work with churros too? Peter asked, impressed. Today I'm helping your mum, Raphael replied, preparing 2 special churros for the boys. What do you think? It's delicious, Michael declared after the first bite. Can you work here every day? Raphael looked at Isabella, a silent question in his eyes. She studied him for a long moment before replying. We'll see how he does first, she said, but there was a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. That night, when it was time to close the stall, Raphael helped Isabella clean everything and put away the equipment. For the first time, she didn't refuse his help. Thank you, she said when they finished. Today was easier with you here. It was a pleasure, Raphael replied, and he truly meant it. Can I help tomorrow too? Isabella hesitated, but this time the hesitation lasted only a few seconds. You can, but are you sure? Frying churros isn't exactly glamorous like closing million-pound contracts. Raphael looked at Peter and Michael, who were playing tag around the stall, their laughter echoing down the almost empty street. He looked at Isabella, with her natural beauty enhanced by the honest weariness of a hard day's work. He thought of his luxurious office, his meetings in conference rooms, his expensive suits and important contracts. None of that mattered anymore. I'm sure, he said, absolutely sure. And for the first time since their reunion, Isabella smiled at him. A small, cautious but genuine smile. It was the first real step towards forgiveness, and Raphael promised himself that he wouldn't waste this second chance. Because he had discovered that true success wasn't measured in money or contracts. It was measured in children's laughter, in brave women's shy smiles, and in the feeling of belonging to something bigger and more important than any business empire. Some things in life truly had no price. And Raphael was finally learning to recognize the value of what mattered most. 2 months had passed since Raphael started helping at the churro stall, and an unexpectedly comforting routine had settled between him, Isabella, and the twins. Every morning, Raphael arrived early to help prepare the dough and organize the ingredients. The afternoons were spent frying churros, chatting with customers and playing with Peter and Michael during breaks. For Raphael, those had been the two most rewarding months of his adult life. For the first time, he felt genuinely useful, part of something real and significant. The boys had spontaneously started calling him Daddy Raph, a title that filled him with equal measures of pride and responsibility. Isabella gradually had begun to lower her defenses. There were still moments of tension, glances laden with old hurts, but there were also moments of shared laughter, conversations about the boys, and even some discussions about the future. It was as if they were cautiously rebuilding not just a friendship, but exploring the possibility of something more. It was on a rainy Thursday that everything changed. Raphael was frying churros when his phone rang insistently. It was Mark, and the urgency in his voice was clear even through the bad connection. "Raphael, you need to come to the office now. It's an emergency." "Mark, I'm working. Can it wait until—" "It can't wait," Mark interrupted him. "Caroline has filed a lawsuit against you and the company. She's alleging moral harassment, breach of contract, and defamation. And there's more. She leaked confidential information to competitors. 3 important clients cancelled their contracts yesterday." Raphael felt as if the ground had opened beneath his feet. "What? How is that possible?" "Come here and I'll explain everything. The situation is critical." Raphael hung up the phone with trembling hands. Isabella, who had noticed the tension in the conversation, looked at him with concern. "What happened?" "Problems at the company," Raphael said, trying to keep his voice calm so as not to alarm the boys. "I need to sort something out at the office." "Will it take long?" Raphael looked at Peter and Michael, who were coloring drawings at an improvised table next to the stall. The idea of leaving them, even for a few hours, filled him with an anguish he couldn't explain. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I'll be back as soon as possible." An hour later, Raphael was in the office facing the worst crisis of his business career. Mark had spread documents across the conference table, each representing another blow to the empire Raphael had built over a decade. Caroline not only leaked strategic information, Mark explained, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. She also manipulated some contracts, altered delivery dates, and even sabotaged presentations. Clients are furious. How long has this been going on? Apparently, since she was hired. 4 years, Raphael, 4 years of systematic sabotage. Raphael analyzed the documents, his businessman's mind automatically calculating the damages. The losses were catastrophic. The company he had built with so much effort was on the verge of bankruptcy, and the reputation he had spent years building was in tatters. "And the lawsuit?" he asked, knowing he didn't want to hear the answer. "She's asking for £20 million in moral damages and another £10 million in compensation. And there's something worse. She gave an interview to that business gossip blog, talking about how you abandoned a pregnant girlfriend years ago." Raphael closed his eyes, feeling a throbbing headache form. Caroline had made good on her threat. Now, the story of Isabella and the twins would be spread across the internet, distorted and sensationalized to cause the maximum possible damage to his reputation. "This is a disaster," he murmured. "It's worse than a disaster. It's a business apocalypse." Mark sat down heavily in a chair. "Raphael, I'm going to be straight with you. The company won't survive this. Even if we win the lawsuit, the reputational damage is irreversible. Investors are already pulling out. Employees are nervous, and the press is preparing to destroy us." Raphael looked out the panoramic window that offered a privileged view of London. 6 months ago, that view represented his dominance over the city, his tangible success. Now, it seemed just a distant reminder of a life that was crumbling around him. "What do you think we should do?" he asked, although he already knew what the answer would be. "Sell the company while it still has some value. Pay off the debts, compensate the employees, and try to save what can be saved." The suggestion hit Raphael like a punch to the gut, but he knew Mark was right. Miller Tech Solutions, the company that had been his life for the past 10 years, was dead. Caroline had ensured that with her systematic sabotage campaign. But when Raphael thought of Peter and Michael, of their painted toy cars and their colorful drawings, of Isabella frying churros with a shy smile on her lips, he discovered that the loss of the company didn't devastate him as it should have. It was painful, yes, But it wasn't the end of the world. Perhaps it was even a liberation. Do what you have to do, he said finally. Sell the company, protect the employees as much as possible, and prepare our defense against Caroline's lawsuit. Raphael, are you sure? Once we start this process, there's no turning back. Raphael thought of the broken toy car he had fixed for Michael, of how Peter hugged him when he arrived at the stall, of Isabella's genuine smile when she saw him frying churros with serious concentration. He thought of the difference between the success he thought he wanted and the happiness he had found in the simplest things. I'm sure, he replied, absolutely sure. When Raphael returned to the stall at the end of the afternoon, he found a scene that made his heart clench. Michael was sitting on the ground, crying, while holding his right arm in an awkward position. Isabella was kneeling beside him, clearly desperate, while Peter cried in solidarity with his twin brother. What happened? Raphael asked, rushing to join them. He fell off the chair while trying to reach a toy, Isabella explained, her words tumbling out in panic. I think he broke his arm. I need to take him to the hospital, but I don't have money for— Don't worry about money, Raphael interrupted her, carefully picking Michael up. We're going to the hospital now. The next few hours were a blur of emergency rooms, X-rays, and doctors explaining that Michael had fractured his arm and would need a cast. Raphael took care of all the details, paid the bills, talked to the doctors, bought the prescribed medications, and even found a small teddy bear in the hospital gift shop to distract Michael during the procedure. Isabella watched everything in silence, her expression a mixture of gratitude and something deeper that Raphael couldn't quite identify. When they finally returned to the small, simple apartment where Isabella lived with the boys, the first time Raphael saw where his family lived, Michael was already asleep in his arms, exhausted by the pain medication. The apartment was tiny, but clean and organized. There were drawings of the boys stuck on the refrigerator, storybooks piled on a small table, and 2 single beds in a room that barely fit the furniture. It was a home built with love, but also with many privations. Raphael helped Isabella put Michael to bed, ensuring that the boy was comfortable and that he had water and medications within reach. Peter, who had insisted on staying awake to make sure his brother was okay, finally succumbed to sleep on the living room sofa. When the 2 boys were sleeping, Raphael and Isabella met in the small kitchen, sharing a cup of coffee and the heavy silence of a difficult day. Thank you, Isabella said finally, for everything, for the quick response, for the hospital, for the medications. I wouldn't have been able to pay for it all alone. You don't need to thank me. They are my sons too. Isabella studied him for a long moment. You lost a lot of money today, didn't you? Raphael looked at her with surprise. How do you know? I know you, Raphael. Or at least I used to. I know when you're worried about business. And I know you would never have left an important meeting unless it was a real emergency. Raphael sighed, deciding there was no point in hiding the truth. He told her everything, about Caroline, about the sabotage, about the lawsuit, and about the probable bankruptcy of the company. When he finished, Isabella was silent for a long moment, processing all the information. You're going to lose everything, she said finally. I'll lose the company, Raphael corrected, but I've discovered that's not everything. Everything is here, in this tiny apartment, with the 3 of you. Isabella looked him in the eyes, and Raphael saw tears forming there. You really have changed, haven't you? I've changed. Or maybe I was always like this, but I was lost trying to be someone else. Raphael reached out to touch her hand. Isa, I don't care if I lose all the money, all the company, all the reputation. I only care about not losing you again. Isabella intertwined her fingers with his, a small but monumentally significant gesture. Raphael, she said softly, there's something I need to tell you, something I never had the courage to admit. What? I never stopped loving you. Throughout all these years, raising the boys alone, struggling to survive, a part of me always hoped you would appear and explain why you had abandoned me. She wiped a tear that ran down her cheek. And now that I know the truth, that you never really abandoned me, I no longer know how to live with all this anger I've carried for so long. Raphael stood up and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. Don't live with anger. Live with me. Let's raise our children together, Isa. Let's be the family we were always meant to be." Isabella looked at him for a long moment, as if trying to memorize every detail of his face. Then slowly she leaned her head and kissed him. It was a gentle kiss, laden with forgiveness, longing, and the promise of a new beginning. When they separated, Raphael saw that the tears in her eyes were now of relief, not of pain. "Promise that this time you won't run away when things get tough," she whispered. "I promise," Raphael replied. "And things will get tough, Isa. I'm going to lose almost everything I've built. We'll have to start from scratch." "I know how to start over," Isabella smiled, and it was the most beautiful smile Raphael had ever seen. "I have experience." That night, Raphael slept on the small sofa in the apartment, listening to the soft sounds of his family sleeping in the nearby rooms. For the first time in years, he slept soundly, without anxiety about the next day's meetings or pending contracts. For the first time in years, he was truly home. The following months tested Raphael in ways he had never imagined possible. The sale of Miller Tech Solutions was a painful and humiliating process, supervised by ruthless lawyers and closely followed by the business media, that turned his downfall into public entertainment. The headlines were cruel. "The tech king who lost everything. How success turned into failure overnight. Former millionaire now sells churros on the street." But as the economic newspapers dissected his business failure, Raphael discovered a strength he never knew he possessed. Each morning, he woke up, on the small sofa in the apartment he now called home, prepared breakfast for Peter and Michael, helped them get dressed for school, and then walked with Isabella to the corner where they set up the churro stall together. The work was hard, honest, and surprisingly satisfying. Raphael learned to wake up at 5 in the morning to prepare the dough, to calculate profits in pence instead of millions, and to find joy in the small daily successes. A customer who came back because they liked the churros, an especially good sales day. Isabella's satisfied smile when they managed to save a few extra notes at the end of the week. Peter and Michael adapted to the new reality with the admirable flexibility of children. For them, having Daddy Raph present every day was much more important than any change in their standard of living. In fact, with Raphael helping financially within his reduced means, their lives had improved considerably. They had new toys, clothes that fit properly, and for the first time in years, Isabella didn't seem constantly exhausted. The true change in Raphael became evident in the small things, the way he patiently knelt to tie Michael's shoes when the boy was still struggling with the cast on his arm, the way he invented crazy bedtime stories, making Peter and Michael laugh until Isabella had to ask for quiet, not to wake the neighbors. The tenderness with which he massaged Isabella's aching feet after a long day standing at the stall. "You know, I never imagined I'd do this," Isabella said one night, as they organized the day's money into small piles on the kitchen table. "Do what?" Raphael asked, counting the £5 notes with the same concentration he once dedicated to £1,000,000 contracts. "Being happy like this, with so little." She gestured around the small apartment, with its walls that needed painting and furniture that had seen better days. "For years, I dreamed that you would return with your fortune, take me to a mansion, and solve all our financial problems. Now you're here without money, sleeping on my sofa and frying churros every day, and I've discovered that this is exactly what I always wanted." Raphael stopped counting the money and looked at her. 6 months of honest work had left his hands rough and burned from hot oil. His face had a tan from working in the sun, and his expensive suits had been replaced by simple jeans and t-shirts. But in Isabella's eyes he saw an admiration he had never seen when he was a millionaire. "Me too," he admitted. "For years, I thought happiness was synonymous with business success. But true happiness is Peter waking me up on Saturdays because he wants to make pancakes. It's Michael showing me a drawing he made at school. It's you smiling when we managed to sell all the churros before the end of the day." Isabella got up from the chair and went to him, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Raphael, can I ask you something?" "Anything. Do you miss it? The money, the power, the life you had before?" Raphael thought about the question honestly. Did he miss the financial comfort, the security of knowing he could pay any bill that came? Occasionally. Did he miss the professional recognition, the respect that his business success guaranteed him? Sometimes. But when he weighed that against the feeling of Peter and Michael running to hug him at the end of the day, against the genuine intimacy he had developed with Isabella, against the peace of mind that came from living an authentic life, "No," he replied, and realized he was completely sincere. "I don't miss anything from that life." It was at that moment that they heard Peter crying in the room. Isabella immediately got up to check what was happening, followed closely by Raphael. They found the boy sitting on the bed, holding a crumpled paper with tears streaming down his face. "What happened, my love?" Isabella asked, sitting on the bed and pulling Peter onto her lap. "It's some news from school," Peter sobbed. "The teacher said it's about Daddy Raph. She said that maybe he can't pick us up from school anymore." Raphael took the paper Peter was holding. It was a printout of an online news article, obviously left by some malicious parent who wanted to cause trouble. The headline read, "Former businessman sued for harassment. Fortune lost in scandal." Raphael's heart clenched. He had expected that the news about Caroline's lawsuit would eventually reach the boys, but he hadn't prepared a way to explain the situation to 5-year-olds. "Peter," he said softly, sitting on the bed beside the boy and Isabella. "Can I explain what's happening?" Peter nodded, wiping his nose on his pajama sleeve. "A person who worked with me didn't like it when I discovered she was doing wrong things in the company, so she invented lies about me to try to harm me." "What kind of lies?" Michael asked. He had woken up to his brothers crying and was now sitting on the other bed, listening to the conversation. "She said I was cruel to her at work. She said I'm a bad person." "But you're not a bad person," Peter protested vehemently. "You fix our toys and make pancakes on Sunday and always pick us up from school. And you always give hugs when we're sad," Michael added. Raphael felt a deep emotion rise in his throat. The boy's innocent loyalty, their absolute faith in him despite the headlines and gossip, was more valuable than any judicial verdict. "Thank you, boys. It means a lot to know that you believe in me." "Daddy Raph," Peter said, using the title that had become natural in recent months. "Are you going to have to leave because of these lies?" "Never," Raphael replied with a certainty that surprised even him. "No matter what happens, no matter what lies they invent about me, I will never leave you again. Do we promise, the three of us?" "We promise," the boys said in unison, extending their small hands to make a pact with him. Isabella watched the scene with tears in her eyes, but now they were tears of gratitude and love, not of pain. 3 weeks later, Caroline's lawsuit was finally judged. Raphael had hired a competent but not extravagant lawyer, Dr. Marina Stone, who worked with the precision of a surgeon to dissect each of Caroline's allegations. The trial revealed the true extent of Caroline's manipulation. Recovered. Emails showed that she had deliberately sabotaged projects, leaked confidential information to competitors, and created compromising situations to then allege harassment. The judge, Judge Ferdinand Smith, showed no sympathy for her claims. "Ms. Rivers," the judge said during the closing arguments, "the evidence presented clearly demonstrates that you orchestrated a systematic campaign of sabotage against your employer. Your allegations of moral harassment are not only unfounded, but appear to be part of a calculated strategy to extort compensation after being discovered in your criminal activities." Caroline was sentenced to pay compensation to Raphael and received a sentence of 2 years in a semi-open prison regime for corporate sabotage and extortion. More importantly for Raphael, the trial publicly proved that the allegations against him were false. But when Raphael left the courthouse, he realized that the legal vindication meant less to him than he had expected. During the months of struggle to clear his name, he had discovered that the opinions of others mattered far less than the love and respect of his family. Peter and Michael were waiting for him outside the building with Isabella, holding a small banner that read, "Our Daddy is the best," decorated with their characteristic, colorful drawings. The sight broke Raphael's heart in the best possible way. "Did we win?" Peter asked when Raphael approached. "Yes, champ, we won." "Does that mean you'll be rich again?" Michael asked with innocent curiosity. Raphael knelt to be at the boy's height. "It means that everyone now knows that your daddy is not a bad person. But no, I probably won't be rich again." "That's okay," Peter shrugged with the pragmatism of a child. "We don't need much money anyway. We have churros." Raphael laughed, the first genuinely happy laugh he had given in months. Peter was right. They had churros, they had each other, and they had a love that had survived years of separation, betrayal, and reconstruction. A year later, Raphael and Isabella stood in front of the registry office, dressed in simple but elegant clothes, with Peter and Michael as their only witnesses. It was a small, intimate wedding, but more meaningful than any extravagant ceremony that money could have bought. "Do you promise to love, honor, and cherish each other, in wealth and in poverty, in sickness and in health for all the days of your lives?" asked the Justice of the Peace. "Justice Our." Anna Caroline Fisher. "We promise," Raphael and Isabella replied in unison, their voices laden with years of longing, forgiveness, and hope. When they kissed to seal their union, Peter and Michael applauded enthusiastically, shouting, "Long live Daddy and Mummy!" with such joy that even the judge smiled. The celebration was held in the small living room of their apartment, now officially their home as a family of 4. Mark had come from London to attend, along with some friends and neighbors who had become part of their extended family during the difficult months. "Raphael," Mark said during a quiet moment, "I need to admit something. When you first told me you had found Isabella and the boys, I thought you were making a mistake. I thought you were throwing away years of hard work for guilt and sentimentality. And now?" Mark looked around the small apartment, taking in the drawings stuck on the refrigerator, the second-hand furniture that was clean and comfortable, the laughter of Peter and Michael playing in a corner. "Now I realize that you didn't throw anything away. You found exactly what you were looking for all along." Raphael nodded, watching Isabella help the boys distribute small pieces of cake to the guests. She was wearing a simple white dress that they had bought at a popular shop. Her hair was styled simply, and she looked more beautiful than she ever had in any expensive restaurant or fancy event. "You know what the funny thing is?" Raphael said to Mark. "I spent years thinking that success was about building something bigger and bigger, gaining more and more. But real success is about finding what you already have and appreciating it fully." Late that night, after all the guests had gone home and Peter and Michael were sleeping, soundly in their room, Raphael and Isabella sat on their small sofa planning their future. "So, husband," Isabella said with a mischievous smile, "what's the plan now?" "Well, wife," Raphael responded, enjoying how natural the word felt, "I was thinking that maybe we could expand the churros business. Maybe get a second cart. Maybe eventually a small restaurant." "Sounds ambitious," Isabella teased. "Are you sure you won't miss the big corporate challenges?" Raphael pulled her closer, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "Isa, the biggest challenge I ever faced wasn't closing a £1 million contract or building a tech company. It was learning how to be a good father to Peter and Michael. It was earning back your trust and love. It was discovering that happiness doesn't come from what you have, but from how deeply you appreciate what you have." Isabella turned to look at him. "And you do appreciate it? This simple life with churros and a small apartment and children who need their shoes tied every morning?" "I treasure every second of it," Raphael said, "especially the moments when Michael shows me a drawing he made at school, or when Peter explains to me the rules of a game he invented, or when you smile at me the way you're smiling now." "What do you mean?" "Like you know a secret that makes everything worth it." Isabella laughed softly. "I do know a secret." "What?" "We're going to need a bigger apartment soon." Raphael looked at her with confusion. "Why? The boys are fine in their room and we—" Isabella placed his hand on her belly, her eyes twinkling with joy and mischief. The realization hit Raphael like a lightning bolt. "We're going to have another baby," Isabella confirmed. "Surprise." Raphael stared at her in shock for a moment, then pulled her into an embrace so tight that she laughed and protested that he was going to hurt the baby. "When did you find out?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Last week. I wanted to wait until after the wedding to tell you." Raphael thought about the timing, about how their lives had come full circle. Years ago, Isabella had tried to tell him about Peter and Michael, only to be blocked by Caroline's interference. Now she was telling him about another child, and this time he was completely present, completely committed, completely theirs. "Are you happy?" Isabella asked, studying his expression. "Happy?" Raphael laughed, and it was the sound of pure joy. "Isa, I've never been happier in my entire life. We're going to have another baby. Peter and Michael are going to be big brothers. We're going to need a bigger apartment, maybe eventually that small restaurant you mentioned. We're going to have everything we ever wanted." Everything. Raphael looked around their small, crowded, perfect apartment, listened to the sounds of Peter and Michael sleeping peacefully in the next room, felt the warmth of Isabella in his arms and the knowledge of new life growing inside her. "Everything," he confirmed. "Absolutely everything that matters." Outside, the city of London continued its relentless pace, but inside their small apartment, time seemed to slow down to capture the perfect moment. Raphael Miller, former Millionaire corporate executive, current churros vendor and devoted family man, had finally learned the secret that had eluded him for so many years. True wealth wasn't measured in bank accounts or business contracts. It was measured in bedtime stories, in shared dreams, in the courage to start over when everything falls apart, and in the wisdom to recognize when you've found the most valuable thing in the world, a family built on love, forgiveness, and the promise of tomorrow's possibilities. And for the first time in his life, Raphael was truly, completely, perfectly rich.